changes beginning on September 21st in the year of 2023. FCTV Government Channel 15 is moving to, you ready for this one? Channel 9. And for additional viewing options, please go to www.fctv.org.
As long as it's not District 9.
Too many things going on today.
We have an agenda.
The first item was, we're going to start the meeting late. And the first item on the agenda is an update on watershed permit notice of intent application progress. And I'm not going to be on the spot entirely, Andy.
Hear you.
Huh?
Hear you.
Oh. Can you hear me now? So the first item on the agenda is the update on the watershed permit notice of intent application progress. And I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, Amy, but you guys had a conversation today, Kristen, well, not yesterday. You want to talk about what the selectmen voted and where we're at? Okay.
Are you on FCT? So should I go over here? Should I just?
Oh, wherever you want to go.
Well,
We're on
if you're on
TV.
TV, then I should be.
We're live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Amy Lowell, wastewater superintendent. The select board voted at a recent meeting to move forward with watershed permitting in response to the the sets of regulations, the regulations that you all discussed here at a previous meeting. So the DEP passed the upgrade to, or the changes to the Title V regulations and new watershed permit regulations. And that gave the towns basically two options, to let the Title V regulations move forward and require septic system upgrades ultimately of all properties within coastal pond watersheds in Falmouth, or to file watershed permits, which would provide the town's own plan for managing nitrogen to coastal ponds. And so the select board voted at a recent meeting to select the latter option, which was what you all had recommended as well. And in particular, the plan was to file notices of intent to file watershed permits by January 7th of 2024, so that the Title V regulation requirement that this septic upgrade requirement would not start taking place, not come into force January 7th. It basically puts a stay on the Title V regulation implementation while the town prepares its own watershed permits. So we will need to submit the notices of intent online by January 7th, and then follow that up with watershed planning for all the remaining watersheds and applications for watershed permits.
Thank you.
Question? How much specificity, what do you need to put in the notice of intent? How much specificity is required?
Only a schedule.
Okay.
All we have to do is say when we plan to file the watershed permit applications for all of our watersheds.
And so that would be the last day of 5 years from now, or what's your?
I hope not. So we will talk more about that. That's, we are talking about whether we group them into how many groups and what the timing will look like. We're not ready to talk about that yet, but it certainly will have to over the next couple of months.
Okay,
Where we're at right now for everybody is that Amy and Kristen and Scott from the Board of Health, because the Board of Health has an element inside all of this, and I guess myself a little bit, we're meeting every Tuesday to look at where we're at and what we're doing, and we'll bring regular updates back to this board. I will say, the initial pass at this is, we have 2 estuaries that involve other towns, so they become a little bit special in terms of how we put the notice of intent in and who does what, when, and where. And then we have the South Coast estuaries, which we've done a lot of work on already. And then we have the Buzzard Bay estuary. So the question becomes, do we lump estuaries together, or do we keep them apart and whatnot? But there's a group of people working on this, and we'll keep you updated regularly, okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions or concerns? The next thing is the Department of Environmental Protection. DEP's response to the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center's urine diversion pilot project proposal. I will note that Amy, myself, Ed, and Kim's here, and others, Kristen, we're on a phone call today with Mary Beth Chubb. I thought it was a extremely productive conversation about where we are at with a pilot proposal and how that pilot proposal fits in with their regulations and where we might go. And Ed has sort of been tasked to track a little bit of where we're at with this stuff. So Ed, I turn it over to you.
Okay. As Steve said, it was a very interesting, informative meeting. There were 11 people on the call in total, the one Steve mentioned and 2 from DEP. And they basically kind of surprised me, at least, with saying they recommend what we do is we don't do a pilot program. We go right to a provisional use application. That bypasses part of what's the normal process. Typically, you would do a pilot, 2 years of data, submit that. You need 75% of the participants to succeed, let's say, and meet the data criterion laid out in the proposal. And then you go the next step, apply for provisional use. That's 3 years of data collection. So you're talking probably a 5 minimum to 6 year process to get to a provisional use permit, which then would, if you're successful, allow you to get a general use approval. So bypassing pilot, go right to provisional is a great opportunity to move forward on a faster timeline. It requires 50 systems to utilize this for the 3 years, and they must meet the performance criteria. 90% of them would have to meet the performance criteria, which is, pretty high bar, but that would then allow you to apply for general use. But in the meantime, you've developed all of this great data which we are looking for as to the effectiveness of urine diversion. And that was the narrow scope. We tried to keep the request for proposal to urine diversion. Turns out, suggestions made to include composting toilets, and DEP felt that that would not meet the original proposal as filed with them. So it would divert the effort, dilute the effort. We would have to resubmit this thing and restructure it. Does composting toilets have a value? Absolutely. Where, how many, and what credit for TMDL reduction, which is our ultimate goal as a committee, is up in the air. So that's, I think we would want to keep the scope narrow to get this provisional use system application approved and get the actual permit. We would have to submit data to them from at least 2 other installations, I'll say, somewhere within the country, or they seem to be receptive to anywhere in the world, that used urine diversion and developed a couple of years of data. Falmouth actually did this a few years back, 7, 8 years, where we had a limited alternative program looking at things like urine diversion, composting toilets, eco toilets, whatever you want to call them. So we do have some data that Falmouth accumulated. There's a study that was done by a group up in Vermont that is probably useful, and also in Sweden. They mentioned those, and Kristen's been tasked with submitting data and information that the town and these other studies that she found in her research have developed that would support the application for provisional use. So it's a different thing than a pilot program. submitting that application and that data, they would then schedule a pre-application meeting with us where we would give them our final proposal and hopefully at that point get their approval to proceed. To do that, of course, we need some funding, and that is something that a number of people, Kim included, and others on the board have said, let's look at county, state, maybe federal sources, other towns on the Cape that would benefit from Falmouth's experience in this urine diversion technology proposal. Provisional use, term we got to get used to saying, I guess, now. Turns out DEP has been in conversations with several groups, unbeknownst to us, about urine diversion type programs. A group that I never heard of, I think it was called Circular Sanitation, the Green Center that we're familiar with. So there are some other things out there being looked at that are not part of the committee. Remember that our purview is clean up the estuaries. We are tasked by the selectmen to find technologies and methods to meet the TMDLs that are placed upon the town to clean up the estuaries and do that within the framework of the state guidelines. So that's our mission. Is urine diversion going to be part of that? I certainly hope so, because I think it's another tool in our toolbox, as we've been saying, to move forward with meeting our TMDL guidelines. So I think that summarized what we talked about today. It was really, to me, a good news situation, and we've got our work cut out for us, but we are on a track. Question?
So, no, I think that's a good summary, Ed. My takeaway from talking to Mary Beth Chuck today, who's the gateway for this, is they're not a roadblock necessarily to it. We had a conversation at one point in this about should you change regulations to accommodate urine diversion, and Mary Beth, very much to her credit, had been doing some work already and talked to how they're willing to work it under the sort of the IA rubric and move from pilot, which takes 3 years or 2 years or whatever, all the way to the next step based upon things that are out there. So she was very much on board with trying to work to get to the point that this could become something that would be available to people. But she was very definitive that 3 years of data would be required. So the proposal we last saw was for a 2-year sort of program. My gentleman to my left, who I adore for the fact that he took on this, is going to work on trying to get it to a 3-year program for data collection. So with that, I'll open up to the meeting. I think Steve had his hand up first because he's closest to me, and I see out of my left eye better than my right.
Is that a political statement? Thank you, Ed and Steve. This is all good news. My question is, it was my understanding in connection with IAs that, and perhaps all plumbing fixtures, that provisional application had to do with a given brand or even a given model number.
We went through this.
Like Underwriters Laboratories.
We went through this, okay? And Mary Beth was very clear that the fixtures fell to the plumbing board, not to the, what was the phrase she used today? If you can remember, I'm trying to look at my notes right here.
I'm going to say technology, but I don't.
She talked about technology versus like, so the choice of what you're using for urine diversion falls to the plumbing board. But the technology side of it, which is measuring how much urine can be diverted or gets diverted, was there. So she was actually, I thought she was very, very articulate and very good in our conversation today. Amy? Yeah, Amy was giving head nodding. So,
To
Okay, well,
clarify.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but obviously, along the way, you have to think about that.
We
I
don't.
mean, whether you need plumbing approval, and whether, if you get different nitrogen results for different fixtures, how you deal with that in the statistics.
Right.
And also all the complications of compliance.
So I'll give you the big picture here, which is basically, she said that we have to follow 15286 CM, under the CMR, which is whether it's whatever. And you need 50 installations to get data from, okay? And she didn't care, it didn't seem, which type of fixtures we were using to get to the point of proving that urine diversion had some value, okay? But she did say that what the fixtures were and how the fixtures were approved was very much part of the state plumbing code and part of the group in Boston that reviews plumbing, okay? Tom?
2 points. One, I would think the wise thing to do, given the minimum number of 50, is that you go ahead and try to sign up 75 and probably 100.
100, I agree with you
For
1,000.
sure.
Agree with you.
Okay. The other thing, if the state declares that we're eligible for a provisional program using whatever we call out in our proposal, what say does the Falmouth Board of Health have in what happens in town?
I can't answer that question directly, but,
Yeah,
but they have some involvement. But back to your number.
Yeah.
If you go into the section of the code that talks about approving alternative systems, they talk about, there's a pilot stage, which is very small, and then the provisional stage is 50 installations and 3 years' worth of data, okay? And we had a conversation around, like, certain things, just because somebody puts one in this year and get 3 years of data, till they get to the 50 and the end of the 3 years of data, it doesn't all work out. So we did talk about the fact that people might drop out
Right.
of the program, and that you don't start with 50, you try to get
Yep.
a number bigger than
Right.
50.
Quite a bit bigger, I think.
Some number bigger than 50,
Yeah.
so that if people drop out, you still have 50 people in there at the end of 3 years with data for them to be able to get to what we need, which is basically, what we're looking for is for the DEP to make a determination that urine diversion would be best available nitrogen-reducing technology per their regulations, the BATNR, or whatever it's called, and that to the extent you had urine diversion toilets, you would get some specific amount of credit against the nitrogen reduction. So that, yeah, like, again, it was a very productive call today. I was surprised.
Yeah, I think bottom line, DEP is saying they'll consider this, assuming that they approve our application, which all indications are they will, if we do our homework correctly. They will consider this an IA system. So instead of a $30,000 or $40,000 total new system buried like your Title V, if we are successful, they would approve urine diversion instead. You would still need a septic system to handle your gray water, but the urine diversion would be your, in effect, your IA. Now, that's huge, because the cost of an IA, it may get to 10,000, it may be only 5, but it depends on the sophistication of your equipment and the size of your house. If you've got 4 bathrooms, well, you're probably going to want to put in 4 of these toilets. You don't have to, but for them to give us a number and a credit, the best data would be everybody that urinates in a house will urinate in the system. And then we know the total property impact to the environment, and therefore they can use that data in starting to develop a number. How many kilograms of nitrogen will they give us credit for? A key to getting these things approved is they must meet or exceed, after the 3 years of data, what a Title V does. Because the details of the law are real murky, and I've just started to scratch into it. And Kristen and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is an IA is going to be as good as or better than a Title V. Now, to help us in our TMDL, they got to be a heck of a lot better. They got to get into the kind of numbers that Amy achieves at our town plant, 3, 6, 8, or 9 parts per million nitrogen, not 20, 30, 50, because that won't cut it. That won't get us to where we have to be to clean up the estuaries. So,
Okay, good. Any other comments from the
Yeah,
board?
well, I have a question.
I'm going down here.
I think Ken maybe was, I don't know. I had one question,
Go
but
ahead,
Ken might have been
Jordan,
before
go
me.
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if Brian was on the meeting from the test center?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Brian and Brian were both on the meeting,
Oh, awesome.
okay? Yeah, so this was very constructive conversation.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to delve just a little deeper into the plumbing code issue, because, if we can't get systems installed due to the plumbing code, we're kind of dead in the water in a lot of
I would
ways.
say, right now, where people are at, from the Green Center and other places for going to the plumbing board, they're making reasonable progress, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Is that something where DEP can help us by chiming
They're
in
not,
with
they're
it?
not opposing us.
Okay.
I have discussed, if I may, this whole proposal with the town plumbing inspector, and he's been through this a little bit back when the original proposal and the town pilot project was done 7 or 8 years ago.
Toilets, yeah.
And so he knows the law backwards and sideways. He knows the procedures for getting plumbing board approval, and he's ready, willing, and able to work with us or the Green Center or anybody else to get approval for a particular device. You mentioned Board of Health. John Waterbury has indicated, and I asked him about this, they are planning to put that on their agenda in the near future. I don't believe they have yet, but, so they're looking at what their input would be. The DEP did have some reservations about things like, cubbies, it's called? You know,
Cubies?
some-
Yeah, yeah,
Cubies,
there's
cubies, cubbies, I get
there's a lot of
confused.
details
But, just from a sanitary and a health side, okay, so that all would fall under Board of Health purview and the plumbing board. So, an ideal installation is a solid, tight tank, hundreds of gallons, maybe 500 gallons, that much of, to collect the urine buried in your yard, per the regulations that are there already in place. Hard pipe to your urine diverting toilet, urinal, or whatever device you're using, properly and legally vented under plumbing code guidelines, up through the roof like any other toilet, provisions for sanitation, cleaning, and, odor control, all under Board of Health, to the earlier question. So, whole bunch of things involved in this, but they're all out there and ready, willing, and able to work with us to come up with a proposal that meets the legalities, meets the data that we want, DEP would want, and they really didn't give us any guidelines of what they would want for data. They said, you tell us what you're thinking of doing, and we'll tell you if it's going to be useful. So the onus is on us to develop that. But everybody's very cooperative. Everybody's kind of, I think, excited about this because it does give a lower cost option for what is not only a Falmouth problem, but others.
Thank you.
Steve?
I'm just going to do this. We've heard from, I'll come back to you. I've heard from the board. I showed up late, so it's my responsibility for showing up late a little bit. I have to be out of here by 6:30 because my grandson's having a birthday party. So we're going to keep moving along, okay? Go ahead, Steve.
In the spirit of that, please assure me that there will be another discussion of this same topic within 2 or 3 months
Okay.
of
Well, I-
extensive length,
I would
not
say-
limited by time.
I would say every meeting going forward, we're going to talk urine diversion. Okay, any comments from the audience? And I saw Amy's hand first. I got Kim, and I have, what's your name again? Joan, okay. Joan's a regular here. I should learn her name. Amy?
I agree that it was a positive meeting. I do want to say, again, that when we talk about urine diversion, we talk about what the pilot is actually accomplishing and what it is not accomplishing. And in particular, when we are comparing it to other solutions and the cost of other solutions. So I do think this is a worthwhile pilot. I'm not speaking against it, but I want to be clear about the expectations for what it accomplishes. It does not treat, at this time, the pilot would not treat or have a disposal plan for the the urine or the nutrients that are collected. So if we're making a comparison between the urine diversion and, for example, conventional wastewater treatment or even the IA systems, that piece needs to be acknowledged.
Thank you, Amy. Kim, you're next.
Kim Comart, Falmouth Pond Coalition. Just briefly, I also think it was a great meeting. Just a few points of information. One is, I think as you mentioned, Hilda and Earl have been in touch with the State Plumbing Board, put in a formal application to get 12 different urine diversion devices permitted for the pilot project, so that those discussions are in process. I'll reiterate that in order for us to incentivize people to do this, I say again that a robust education campaign is going to be very helpful. Subsidies will be essential. After today's call, I got on the phone with people from 3 different towns, Sandwich, Mashpee, and Wellfleet, about the possibility of spreading this out, having more towns participate. I think it might help us hit the 75 number more easily. I think it might help us get county funding, because we'd have those representatives to the county assembly also advocating for funding. I guess the downside of that would be that, if we have 25 people in Falmouth doing this instead of 50 or 60, that could dilute the sort of impact in our town and the sort of virtuous cycle, that I've talked about. But anyway, it was all very positive, and I just wanted to, especially put on this table the idea of having a multi-town effort. That's it.
Kim, on behalf of the board, thank you for your continued efforts to engage others in this, because it's important.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Joan, and then I'll come over.
Joan Letterman, Precinct 1, and my persisting interest for showing up at these meetings is to keep good ideas afloat. One of the good ideas I heard at the last meeting was when Ken Foreman suggested or inquired about mandating in new construction the use of urine diverting toilets, perhaps. Did I get that right? Did I
Well,
get
yeah,
that from you?
I floated it as an idea.
Right, and so I just want to keep it afloat, because I had that idea independently, but I didn't even know if it would be legal. I don't know how that happens, but I think it's worth pursuing. And the one other thing that I think also is extremely important is educational venues, informal ones, not just on websites and that reach everybody. And I'm not going to get into the detail about that, but all ages, different kinds of intelligence, not just people who read the newspapers, and I'll end with that.
Thank you, Joan. Corey?
Evening. Corin Peterson from the Buzzards Bay Coalition. Thanks. I just want to underscore Amy's comments that there's a piece missing from the pilot program, just to acknowledge that there is that piece of the ultimate fate of the nitrogen in the urine, and making sure that we're comparing that to the costs and the treatment, comparing that to conventional systems and IA systems. So I just want to underscore her comments. Thank you.
So, no more public comments, no more comments from the board. I would point out that I think our next step is to go back with the test center. Ed, you've got your marching orders here a little bit. And we'll work on a proposal that covers a 3-year period, because the first proposal was a 2-year period. And very clearly today, the positive thing was that they're willing to move it under their regulations in a certain way, rather than rewriting regulations that could take forever. And so we'll be working with Brian and Brian. They'll come back at the meeting in the future with maybe a different proposal, and try to keep this advancing along so that we can get the data we need to get to the point that this is all approved. With that, I will close urine diversion for the time being. Our technical consultant has sent me a nice picture along the way that says, if you mark out some letters in Speedway, it becomes P-Way, which is very interesting and funny. The annual report, did everybody get a copy of the annual report? So, this annual report has been very, I don't want to say expansive, I don't want to say it's too narrow, but it's been very sort of minimalized a little bit. It goes in to a booklet that all town meeting members get. We've kicked this around a little bit internally. I always would like to suggest that it's better for us to put together a good PowerPoint presentation to town meeting members if there's something we want to really get to them. But in the meantime, that's there. My style is not to just say that looks good, it's been updated from last year's sign off and send it in. It is due on the 22nd of September. So with our meeting schedule, if there is something in the annual report that is of substance or of concern to anybody, I will survey this board. I'm going to skip the audience out there for what's in there. I'm going to start at the far left-hand end here.
My only comment on it is just that I think it would be nice to highlight the outfall a little bit more as one of those major topics.
As where we're going, okay. Kristen, you're taking notes, thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I agree completely with emphasizing the outfall. Certainly, it's a big thing coming up, and it's really dramatically going to change the way we deal with our treated wastewater.
Okay.
It really is flipping over a new page, and I'll let it go at that. I do appreciate, we do a bunch of different things, and we've tried to hit pieces of each.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I appreciate the feedback here. Steve?
I was going to say it's fine as it is, but I agree with what Jordan and Tom just said.
Make it a little more clear that we're really pushing the outfall thing. Yep, okay.
Ditto on that. I think it was fine, but yeah, that is a great point, Jordan. And I think the other, as part of that, you know, the select board did just vote to use $550,000 of the Air Force Center of Environmental Excellence, I believe it is, funds to partially fund the outfall testing. The article is
Next
going to
round,
be
yeah.
on this upcoming fall town meeting. So I think that's really an important thing. You know, things are evolving very, very quickly in this, and I think that's good news. You know, almost every week, something new and good is coming out as part of this program. You know, the outfall, the meeting today with DEP, the select board endorsing recently the recommendation of this board and the Board of Health to submit the letter of intent that Amy and the others that you mentioned, Steve, are working on. So things are happening so quickly that it's almost, you know, snap your neck around and get whiplash because it's good stuff and it's moving, but it's important, I think, to include that briefly in the annual report.
So can I respond to that? The annual report is for fiscal year, and the fiscal year ended at the end of June.
Oh.
So that's kind of why those things haven't been included.
I stand corrected and
That-
informed.
That said, there's no reason why, if we were going to do an oral presentation at town meeting, we couldn't include more recent.
Yeah.
And one very subtle stylistic thing everywhere through here, and I realized I missed it in here at least once. Sorry, Kristen. I've been very careful to refer to it as an offshore outfall and not an ocean outfall, because the important distinction is onshore versus offshore disposal, and that really splits those two, and technically it's not in the ocean anyway.
Excellent.
So, anyway,
I
I
like
missed
that.
this one. I'm sorry,
I like
Kristen. I tried to get them all.
I told Tom he's only allowed one review of documents, and he can't submit any additional edits ever.
But anyway, that's the only other thing I would say on there. It's a very minor thing, but it's on the middle of the
So,
second page.
I would accept a motion from anybody
I'll make,
to say that the annual report for town meeting with the comments or corrections as noted is acceptable to go forward.
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
Okay? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Thank you. Appreciate that. We have been working diligently for eon or a decade or maybe longer on a letter to town meeting members relative to why the program we've been working on is a good program, might not be a perfect program. And I don't know quite how to open this up between different people. There were some comments, John Waterbury is not here, he made a few comments on it. But Tom, you're our scrivener.
Yes, I'm-
Anybody's a scrivener, and I would like to turn this over to you if I
Okay.
can.
Um,
How do you do?
What you see is the result of a lot of head banging on several walls here in town. I won't point out the actual spot. The only thing I think significant here to note is John Waterbury added what's the fourth paragraph here now, and I deliberately left it italicized to have it stand out
Yep.
from the existing text, because it's the only substantive change in what people have seen before. I mean, it's little tiny bits of wordsmithing I've done here and there, but that's the only substantive change. And I think it's a good idea to include it here, because we do have two funding articles, options, whatever you want to call them, coming up. And they're obviously very closely related, and that's the only thing I would say about what's here, but.
What do you want to do?
I move that unless someone has some objections, that we approve it as Tom has written it.
I have to say that I have not had a chance to see the current draft.
It was sent out.
I believe that it was, I just haven't had a chance to look at it.
You read it, Ed?
Yes.
You want to second it?
I want to say
Is this it?
one minor thing.
Okay.
Steve Layton is not merely a member of the board, but he is vice chair, and he's listed as only a member, just semantics.
Oh, we need to change that.
Yeah. And,
Yeah, well, there's some minor things on that page I want to talk to you
you know,
about.
the other thing, you know, and I'm happy to second it and approve it, but what is our timing plan for this? And the reason being, as I was saying earlier, that it doesn't fit in maybe the annual report because of when that expires, its timeframe, but things are happening quickly. You know, the select board, two recent votes that affect the message we want to get to town meeting, that a direction has been chosen by the executive board, a branch of this town government, to go with the notice of intent. I think that's very important to emphasize to town meeting members. And also, you know, the approval of $500,000 strong of alternate funding to the outfall study. So that affects that article. So at some point, you want to get that message to town meeting members. My feeling is we don't want to send this out too early, because things are happening too
Right,
quickly.
we don't,
No, but I listening to what you just said, there's probably like a line or two at the top, Tom, that should say, this is the Water Quality Management Committee's letter to you as of whatever. We're a very active board, things keep moving. I like that.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of getting it to somebody and then doing a follow-up to see if they saw it or read it or whatever.
right.
We are in September. October's coming, and there's gonna be Halloween. I don't know what you're wearing for a costume, Ed, but I hope to come by your house and get some candy. Steve, you got a costume picked out yet? No, okay. But yeah, I'd like to sort of, we've been iterating this for a couple of months.
We have. I'm worried that we're trying to cover too many bases. This is about getting this article passed.
Yes.
And I don't, my personal feeling is we have a whole, so we heard feedback from folks, and I know from my personal experience as a town meeting member, you get a lot of letters. The less information, the better. Let's keep it focused on the article. There's a whole paragraph here on urine diversion. I don't think we need it. we're not addressing urine diversion in this article, I think we should take it out and shorten the letter.
Okay, stop right there. Do you want to make a motion to remove urine diversion?
I would make that as a motion.
Okay. Does anybody want to second that?
And let me just add one other bit about it. We do mention it in the final history and context paragraph, so it's not, it's being totally deleted, we just don't need to go into it in depth.
Anybody want to second that
I
motion?
second that. I think it's a good idea, Ken.
Any comment?
Yeah, I hear what Ken is saying, but this is a lobbying document. It's not the annual report. It's to do a better job than we did in the Springtown meeting of convincing, showing people why it's in the best interest of the town to vote for this. I don't know beans about the politics of town meeting, but it's my understanding that the swing vote that caused it to lose in the spring may have contained a large number of people who thought the alternative was urine diverting toilets, and that they wanted those instead of this. This explains how you can have both.
Right, but we also address it in the history and context. We say, if I remember correctly.
Well, actually, there's a mistake there that, if I can jump right in here, it says our
Please do.
recommendations. We've never recommended urine diversion, we've considered it, so that needs to be slightly
I just-
reworded.
Yeah, I just think, we can, it doesn't require an entire paragraph that basically adds 20% to the length of the letter. I think,
Let's
and,
just,
and I mean, I also.
we've all heard my opinion, we've all heard your opinion, let's just vote on it.
Jordan?
I guess, having heard Steve's, I do think that the urine diverting toilets was, a very prominent issue in the earlier phase of this article going forward, so in some ways, I think maybe there should be a sentence or two, maybe we can shorten it to just acknowledge that we're looking into it and there are questions that we were trying to answer. I don't know if there's like a happy in between here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
Well-
topic sentence is sufficient. Urine diverting toilets deserve further study, and we support future articles that would, the question is there going to be an article, and does Kim know?
There is an article. Kim?
Yeah. So,
Kim, there is a petitioner's article for fall town meeting, right? And I believe, correct me if I get wrong here, that the intent is to use that article to promote or develop a better understanding of the concept of urine diversion. I don't know if there's a financial number associated with it. I've been asked by the finance committee.
It's really designed to sort of preview what we hope will be an article in perhaps April, where there would be a funding recommendation and request, perhaps from the select board, hopefully endorsed by the Water Quality Management Committee, for the pilot project.
Yeah.
Can I speak then for what I'm gonna call a compromise? We do the topic sentence, and then when Steve came up with his list of things, I don't want to use the word crafted, I constructed the rather lengthy closing sentence. And basically, if you look at the last 3.5 lines of that paragraph, it puts it all in a time frame that says we can't do this right now because it's going to take several years to answer these questions. And so I think we could drop the middle 5 lines or whatever it is of the paragraph and squeeze everything together.
That's okay with
I like
me.
that.
I would have to
that's-
rewrite that
no.
last sentence.
That's
but-
fine. We have another meeting in 2 weeks.
Right, so.
I would suggest that based upon everything we learned today,
Yep,
that paragraph can be,
Cut in
I'll
half.
gut it. To use a technical term, I'll gut it.
right.
And tie
I
the
just-
head and tail together.
to indicate that,
Okay.
we are actively working with
Okay,
this.
so that's my plan.
Right.
If the rest
Thank
of the
you.
committee likes that idea, we'll
Thank you
table the
all.
motion.
Do you want to withdraw the motion?
Well, so we're
You
not
want a
going to
motion
vote
strike-
right now, we'll
and a
wait.
motion to
We'll
strike it.
table it.
Well, let's, yeah, Table it for now.
Okay,
All those in favor of tabling the motion?
yes.
Aye.
The main motion. This is not just tabling Ken's
No,
motion.
Ken's motion was to strike urine diversion.
Right, but we'll
Well,
table
strike
the
that
approval.
paragraph.
Well, we're holding off on approval of
On the
final
approval.
We
approval.
never got a motion to approve.
I'll withdraw mine, and you can just we can table the motion to
Fine.
approve.
We're getting close. There's another week
Okay.
of playing around with this.
Good.
Thank you. And the other thing I would add is that I think it would be silly to send it out too early.
No, we don't want to send it early, unless we want to send it a couple times.
That's good.
May I make one?
Yeah.
I mean, we should.
We'll
we
change
should-
the
If there are any
recommendation.
other
Yeah.
suggestions, they should be brought up now, too.
Yes.
So that we don't have to go through this again. One of which is that in the last section,
It's terrible to write.
under history and context, to be completely honest, after it says that is exactly what the WQMC has done, to change our recommendations, that pair of words, to the different pair, no, to the single word options. Because the
I'm
word
sorry,
include stays
you're in
there.
the last paragraph?
Yeah, the middle of the last
Which,
paragraph.
which sentence? Fourth?
Well, it says
It's
our
the fourth line.
recommendations include, and they haven't
That
included.
is exactly what the WQMC has done. Our recommendations include, change to options include. Because we have not officially recommended everything in the subsequent list.
Oh, okay. Options considered include or something.
Yeah.
So, Tom, you can,
Yeah, I've already.
Tune that up,
Steve and
too.
I had both hit those same speed bumps earlier and had conversed about it, so.
Yeah,
We'll come up with something.
I didn't make a lot of comments, but this last paragraph bothered me a little bit, because I seldom beat my own drum. And so the line that says, this is exactly what the water quality, if you can reword that, Tom,
I like it.
okay, I will
I
leave it
think it's
alone.
powerful.
I will leave it alone. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I will rework that and get it back to you, Kristen, for your distribution once I've,
Yep.
okay.
All right?
When does the signing of this happen? I notice it has all of our
So,
names on it for
so,
signing.
do you want to talk about this now or later?
Let's wait.
No.
Well, what's the overall strategy? You have to work
No, no,
backwards from the town meeting.
I've got another item on the agenda.
Totally up to you.
Jordan has reached out to indicate that she's got a number of conflicts going on.
Oh.
And
that's you, right?
is going to, is it recluse or recluse? Recluse, I don't know the words.
Recuse?
Recuse herself in the near future. She hasn't formally done it yet. So when she's asking, when does this letter go and who signs it, I think she's got a little bit of personal concern there. So, I want to say, I've done this in some emails to her. I appreciate your voice. I appreciate your perspective. We need to work diligently, because there's only so many seats on this board, to find somebody who can adequately represent communities that you're representing as we move forward. So at some point in time, you need to send something to the town clerk, but as long as you can wait to send that, I would appreciate it, so that I can get your signature.
Well, we should be, it sounds like we should be able to decide on this at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Which is very soon, right?
Yeah.
In 2
But
weeks.
I'm just
Yep.
framing things here.
Yep,
Okay.
Try to be respectful of committee members, their
thanks.
timetables and things, okay?
I think that should be fine.
Good.
I mean, I'm looking for some old ancient white man to join the board.
Upper middle class of certain
middle class
political
of certain political
inclinations.
Lives on the west
No,
side of Falmouth.
I would love,
Precinct 1, he has to be from precinct.
I want to make the board,
First
I
requirement.
want to add 3 members to the board and add diversity, but we'll have to do it one step at a time.
You'd
Okay.
have to find 3 people willing to serve on this board.
Oh, that aspect, okay. All right, I'm going to close item 4,
Yes.
and I'm going to move to the reports of members and staff. Ken,
I have a report?
do you have any reports?
No.
Okay,
Did I?
I don't know, I'm just going down. I'm just checking. Okay,
Okay, I don't think I do.
You need to talk?
I have
Wait a minute, we're gonna get a report from the water superintendent, who's gonna give great news about the bids
Ooh,
on wastewater.
Wastewater, not water, wastewater.
Remember, you were the water superintendent.
I was, when?
We don't want to get the drinking water confused with the wastewater yet.
Yeah.
We do a good job, but not that good.
It's all water, it's all water.
Two things. I'll start with what Ed brought up, which was the select board did vote on Monday night to support, to provide $550,000 in AFSI mitigation funds towards the outfall work that the town wishes to do next. To clarify, the total request is going to be, is $1.4 million for data collection leading up to permitting. The remainder of the request will be, there will be a request in the fall town meeting. And it won't be an article, it won't be a separate article, it's part of the capital plan, the way it's being structured. So the support of those ASC funds for that makes obviously a reduction in what's needed on the capital plan for that project. The second thing is, we opened the bids last Thursday for the wastewater treatment facility improvement project, and we had 5 qualified general contractors bid on the project. And we don't have an award yet, but we have an apparent low bidder whose bid was a little bit less than $26.2 million. And it's a good bid. We have,
26.2 million was the engineer's estimate, correct?
it's almost exactly.
Okay, so
We had a,
We're within the budget.
yes, we are within the budget. So we had an independent engineer estimate the cost for this project back last fall. And that was the reason for the increase in the budget request at April town meeting. The bids came in within budget, and we will be able to award the project. So very good news, 5 good bids. The 2 low bids were within $10,000 of one another. Their base bid was within $100 of one another. So very tight bids. So good news. We'll be able to award that and move forward. RH White is the apparent low bidder, but we have to finish the review of all of the bids before we can award.
Thank you for that positive information.
yes.
Ed?
I'll try to be brief, unaccustomed as I am, but having been tasked to be, set up a subcommittee for urine diversion, or as Kristen calls me, the P-point person, triple P, or P cubed if you're so inclined. And Tom has volunteered to be the other Water Quality Management Committee member of the subcommittee, and that's the max we're allowed so that it's not a violation of open meeting laws and all that stuff. And we have decided, after due deliberation, to limit the committee to 5 members. We have identified and have started reaching out to the 3 that we would like to have as members, and 2 have already replied in the affirmative, so we've got 4, and the 5th will be contacted shortly, and hopefully will also agree. If not, we'll go for an alternative. But we wanted to keep it small, we wanted to keep it effective, and we have a lot to move forward with as we gather this data, as Steve mentioned earlier, and I, and the rest of that. And we're on today's meeting that we're looking at now a 3-year requirement for data collection, and with somewhere between a month, 2, and a 12-month preparation and planning and engineering, call it, we're looking at probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a 4-year program. So I reached out to Brian for some clarification on data that he had in his original proposal financially.
Brian who?
Baumgartel?
I'm helping you out here. Brian from the
Baumgartel.
test center.
Yes, from MassTech. I'll learn to pronounce his name better, but it's Baumgartel, I believe.
Brian. It's
Brian.
easy. Just say Brian.
Brian from MassTech. Anyway, I extrapolated some of the numbers, just take 3 years, program, make it into a 4, and we're looking at right now, correcting a math error he had in the original, just over $1 million program, $1,030,000 and change. So that's the order of magnitude. $1 million doesn't get you much anymore, as Eric Turkington used to say, but it's, I think, a reasonable number. Half of that roughly is in subsidies, and that's up for some more clarification, what would be subsidized, how, and to what extent. So it's a reasonable number. That's where we are. That's all I have.
Thank you. Steve? Do you have anything?
No?
Tom?
I've just been staying out of Ed's way.
I'm going to task you a little bit, if I can, to catch up with, because I think you're good on the aquaculture side of it.
Yeah.
Between now and the next meeting, if you could loop in to where the folks at, I always forget their initials, but, you know.
DMS,
Chuck.
DMES,
Loop
yep.
in, because Chuck made a great presentation and pointed out that moving from a pilot to a major
To an
program would be
expansive,
good.
yes.
If you could start to keep track with him where he's at and what he's doing and where that's at, and provide us some update if we're making progress in that
Our
direction, that would be
meeting is
great.
in 25 minutes if you wrap this up.
I'm
6
all-
o'clock is my meeting with him.
I will wrap this up right now.
But thank you for the test.
No, I just, you do a great job, so I just
Yeah.
wanted to keep you on that.
Yes.
I don't have any
Stormwater,
reports.
stormwater, boat ramps.
I don't have any updates, except that, you know, we've contracted, the APCC has contracted with Horsley Witten to do 25% designs this spring for the
Good.
Falmouth, Wacoit Bay Landing.
Nice.
What's that? White's Landing?
White's Landing,
White
yeah.
Landing, White
Nope,
Path.
that's wrong. It's the Wacoit Bay Landing. It's the one that's down closer to Sea Pit.
On Childs River.
No,
Nope.
No, it's not
Nope,
Childs River.
it's not Childs River, it's the
No.
Wacoit Bay Landing
next one.
Road.
Next one down.
So it's like right on Wacoit Bay.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
out
On
near
the
the
north
yacht
side.
club. It's
Yep,
the
exactly.
ramp,
Yep, that
immediately
ramp.
adjacent to the yacht club,
Yeah,
yes.
it's the ramp itself is owned by the state, the
Yep.
parking lot and road, I think, are owned by the town.
That'll be a good thing if that can go through. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
so we have some funds to do the initial, like 25% designs, and then we'll look for more
Alright.
funding as we get
So,
further along.
we got reports of members and staff. Any reports from any people in the audience that I need to know about, or this board needs to know about? Okay, we're gonna move
Wait,
right
I have
on.
one more question.
Oh,
Sorry, I just wanted to know the request for Matt Long to speak. What was the article about? I didn't get to see the article. I couldn't get
so he's been looking at
download.
certain things that sequester nitrogen, grow things, and he's got some buckets and whatnot.
Oh, okay.
And to our friend here from
Get the
the Fifth
Enterprise
Estate,
to
you know, when
send
things
you a
hit the
copy.
front page that say this might be a way to reduce nitrogen, we could ignore it, or we could say, oh, hey, would you like to come before us and tell us how this might work to reduce nitrogen? His response was, he's a little bit away from having a
Actual
complete
numbers.
data set or whatever. And I think my response back to him was, that's great when you're available. We'd want to know, like, the scale of it, how does it work, how much does it happen? And what might be the next steps to try to make this be of value to us. So any way that somebody can suck nitrogen out of our estuaries, I want to hear about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I hope this board wants to hear about it.
He said he had worked with you two.
Yes, he and I wrote a paper together on the Wacoit Bay.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I
Okay,
hadn't seen the article, so I was curious.
all right. I'm going to move to item 6, which is going to be lengthy. I'd like to be out of here by about 6 something if we can. Tom, have you read the minutes?
Yeah, I've not had a chance to digest them, but I have read them. But I like them.
All right, does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any
I'm ready to vote.
comments? Any comments from the audience? Any
I've
comments?
got another meeting at 6,
Any
and I want
comments for
to catch
anybody?
my
All
breath.
those in favor go. Aye. All right, I would accept the motion at this point relative to closing this meeting for any further comments. Should anybody care to make that motion?
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Ken, second.
We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any extensive discussion on closing
No.
this meeting?
I don't want to move too rashly.
I don't know where you're going, but I'm gonna follow you. It sounds like a great meeting.
Well, it's upstairs at the community center, and it's the Shellfish Advisory Committee.
Good.
And
We look
we've got a
for-
full agenda tonight for some
We
reason.
look forward to a report at the next,
Yes, so.
What are you advising the shellfish to do?
oh, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.